Hello again, everyone. This is the Econ Guy, and today we're going to be looking at shifting supply and demand curves. So we're going to be looking at how can the demand and the supply curves shift because of external factors. So let's get straight into that. So let's do a quick review. What is the demand curve and what is the supply curve? So this right here is the demand curve. It is a downwards sloping curve, and it shows us the law of demand. As price goes up, the demand for the quantity demanded of a good or a service decreases. As the price goes down, the quantity demanded increases. So that's what this demand curve is showing us, the law of demand. The supply curve, on the other hand, shows us the law of supply. As the price of a good increases, the quantity supplied will increase because producers of that good or service will be incentivized by the higher selling price to make more of that good. For example, here we see that if the price of something is low, the quantity produced is going to be low. As the price increases, the quantity produced also increases. So this shows us the law of demand, which is as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. And this shows us the law of supply, which shows us that as price goes up, the quantity supplied increases. So now let's take a look at how can the demand curve shift. So let's just review this chart right here. Don't mind these red lines for right now. Just look at this blue demand curve. So let's say that we're comparing the price of ice cream cones. So this demonstrates the law of demand, like all demand curves. If the price of ice cream is high, the quantity demanded of ice cream cones is going to be low. If the price of ice cream is low, the quantity demanded of ice cream cones is going to be high. So if any of these 6 factors change appropriately, this demand curve can overall shift either to the right or to the left, depending on whether there is an overall increase in demand or an overall decrease in demand. So let's just go over these 6 factors. So say that customer preferences change, or advertising is either increased or decreased by the ice cream cone companies. Say that the number of customers change, or maybe the expected future prices of ice cream cones. Maybe people think, oh, in the future ice cream cones are going to be really expensive, so we should buy a lot of ice cream cones right now. Or maybe they think in the future ice cream cones are going to be very cheap, so maybe we should buy a lot of ice cream cones. We shouldn't buy any ice cream cones right now and wait until the price drops and then buy them then. Or what about the change in the price of substitutes? Substitutes are just other goods that can provide the same experience as ice cream cones. So a substitute for maybe ice cream or waffle cones could be ice cream bowls. You can also eat ice cream in bowls, right? You don't have to eat it in a cone. So that could be considered a substitute. If the price for ice cream bowls decreases a lot, then more and more people might start eating ice cream in bowls because it's a lot cheaper. And the last thing is people's income and the state of the economy. If the economy as a whole is doing well and people are making a lot of money, a lot of the increase in demand will be present. And if the economy is doing relatively badly and people's incomes are decreasing, maybe there's a lot of unemployment happening, maybe the economy is going into a recession or maybe even a depression. Obviously, because people have less money to spend, the total amount overall of ice cream cones demanded is going to decrease. Now, taking a look at this chart here, we could call this our before shifting demand curve. So typically, ice cream cones are at $7. You can the quantity demanded for ice cream cones will be around 500. So that's basically telling us when ice cream cones are priced at $7, around 500 ice cream cones will be demanded in this market. And these are totally arbitrary numbers. Obviously, $7 is very expensive for a single ice cream cone, but this is just an example. So say that and this applies, all of the law of demand applies across this entire curve. So say that if ice cream was priced at instead $5, say that this was $5, I don't have it marked here, but say that if this was $5, then the quantity demanded of ice cream cones would be around 600, because now that ice cream cones are cheaper, the quantity demanded is increasing. Now, let's take a look at what some of these different factors can do to this demand curve right here. So say that customer preferences when it comes to ice cream cones change. Maybe customers really start becoming really health conscious, and they feel like, oh, waffle cones, they have too much sugar in them, it's not good for us. So overall, people don't want ice cream cones as much. They're more willing to eat ice cream without a waffle cone. That would be an overall decrease in demand. So now where for $7, at a price of $7, 500 ice cream cones were demanded, now only around 50, that's a tenth, only around 50 ice cream cones will be demanded. So this is a very big shift in the demand curve. So if customer preferences change drastically and all of the customers in a market feel like they either really don't like that product anymore, or they don't want anything to do with that product, or on the flip side, if customers really start for some reason really like loving ice cream cones, maybe they think that, oh, it tastes really good and you haven't lived until you've eaten ice cream with a waffle cone, stuff like that, that would cause an overall increase in demand. Now, where for $7, previously there was only a quantity demanded of 500 ice cream cones, now there's a quantity demanded of 900 ice cream cones. So as these different factors change, it will cause the appropriate shift overall in the demand curve. The demand curve will overall shift either to the left or to the right, depending on what exactly happens with these factors. So now let's take a look at how the supply curve can shift because of external factors. So again, let's take a look at this chart right here. The supply curve is shown here in blue. We can call this our, again, pre-shifted supply curve. That isn't an actual technical term. I'm just saying that this is our supply curve before it has been drastically shifted. So we can call this supply curve S1, and it's just showing us the law of supply. Again, talking about ice cream cones, the price of ice cream cones is here on the vertical axis or the y-axis, and the quantity of ice cream cones is on the x or horizontal axis. Here though, remember, because we're talking about the law of supply and the supply curve, the quantity of ice cream cones is referring to the quantity of ice cream cones supplied. So if there's a high quantity of ice cream cones supplied, that means that a lot of people are making ice cream cones and there's a lot of ice cream cones available for purchase. If there aren't a lot of quantity of ice cream cones supplied, that means not a lot of ice cream cones are being made. So this is just showing us the law of supply. As the price of ice cream cones increases, the quantity of ice cream cones supplied or produced by suppliers will also increase, because it will become more profitable for producers or suppliers to make ice cream cones. They can sell them for more. And these are the four main factors that can cause the supply curve to shift either to the left or to the right. So one thing that can cause the overall supply curve to shift either to the left or to the right is shifting input prices. And inputs are, you can think of them as the different things that are needed to create an ice cream cone. One of the things that you need is obviously sugar, right? So if the price of sugar for some reason drastically increases, then ice cream cones will become more expensive to produce, because people who produce ice cream cone producers and suppliers will need to buy sugar at an expensive rate, which means that they won't have as much of a price gain for each incremental ice cream cone that they sell. Another thing, or the flip side could happen, the price for ice cream cone inputs or ingredients could decrease drastically. Maybe sugar prices fall a lot. It becomes a lot more profitable and easier, cheaper to make ice cream cones because the ingredients are cheaper now. The other thing that can cause the supply curve to shift are improvements in technology. So if technology increases, it'll become, it's kind of thought that it will become a lot easier to produce ice cream cones. Maybe new machines are invented that can make ice cream cones really quickly and things like that, to where as the technology increases, it becomes easier for ice cream cones to be produced. So the supply will increase. And for some reason there's some sort of a big war or something like that, and a lot of the technology or machines are damaged, in that case, technology would kind of be going backwards. So it would be harder to supply or produce a lot of ice cream cones, and therefore supply would decrease. If there's an increase in producers of ice cream cones, say that for some reason a lot of people decide to get into the ice cream waffle cone making business, in that case, because there's a lot of producers, it would be able to affect the supply curve and the quantity supplied. If there's a lot of producers and they don't change how much they produce, that will cause an increase in supply. And that's what this increase in producers is telling us. And finally, increased demand for double products or joint products, as you could also call them. So if you're thinking of a joint product, think of beef and leather. They're both produced from the same kind of input, right? Cattle can produce both beef and they can produce leather. So say that there's for some reason a huge increase in demand for leather, then there will also be an increase in supply. There will be an increase in supply of leather to meet that large demand. For that reason, there will also be an increase in the supply of beef, because if you're going to produce a lot of leather, you'll also pretty much have to produce a lot of beef. There is no alternative. So if there is an increased demand for joint or double products, there will be an increased supply of those, and therefore an increased supply in the products that are tied to, say for leather, beef, or for beef, vice versa, leather. So let's look at the supply curve right here. Say that for some reason, again, the sugar in ice cream cones gets really, really expensive. So this would cause an overall decrease in supply. So now, previously, where for a price of $5, when ice cream cones were selling at $5 on the market, producers were producing around 600 ice cream cones. Now, because it's a lot more expensive, because sugar is expensive, the input price is expensive, making a ice cream cone is expensive. So $5 for an ice cream cone, that isn't enough to support a lot of producers anymore. So the total quantity supplied will decrease to now maybe there's only around 100 ice cream cones being supplied because of the increase in price in sugar. Say that, for another example, there is huge strides and advances made in ice cream cone developing machines. It suddenly becomes a lot cheaper and a lot easier to make ice cream cones. This will cause an overall increase in supply. Now, previously where for $5, about 600 ice cream cones were produced. Now, for $5, 800 ice cream cones can be produced because it's cheaper to produce each ice cream cone. Not each incremental ice cream cone doesn't need to bring in as much money or as much revenue for the ice cream cone producers. So this would, again, the supply curve can either decrease overall, there can be an overall decrease in supply if an appropriate factor changes, or there could be an overall increase in supply. Those are, again, just important things to remember. increase in demand and increase in supply, decreases in demand and decreases in supply, and how those can affect the market. Okay then, see you next time.